We live in an age where silence has become suspicious, where not taking a side is seen as weakness. The internet has turned opinion into a form of survival and outrage into a new kind of currency. Every scroll drags you into another battlefield, endless debates, angry headlines, and digital mobs demanding judgment. We've mistaken reaction for awareness, noise for truth, and slowly we've lost something essential, the ability to think without shouting. The Stoics saw this danger long before the age of algorithms. They warned that a mind enslaved by constant reaction is a mind that no longer belongs to itself. According to Ryan Holiday, silence is strength. Saying less is saying more. When everyone is screaming, wisdom whispers. The greatest power you can hold in a chaotic world is restraint, the ability to pause before reacting, to observe before judging, to understand before responding. Epictetus taught that peace begins when we stop demanding that the world behave as we wish. Marcus Aurelius called this the empire within, the inner fortress that no external chaos can conquer. And Seneca reminded us that wisdom isn't about winning arguments, but mastering the self that craves to win them. According to Seneca, the greatest victory is to conquer oneself. Imagine standing in a storm, yet remaining still. Imagine walking through a world built on noise, but carrying peace inside you. That's the path of the modern Stoic. Not to escape the world, but to stop letting it dictate the rhythm of your soul. As Heraclitus said long before the Stoics, character is destiny, and that character is forged not by what we say, but by what we choose not to say. Welcome to the Stoic Lighthouse. Here we explore that ancient light, the calm that refuses to be extinguished by the chaos of the crowd. Let the Stoic Lighthouse guide you toward peace and wisdom. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to support this journey. Like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who's drowning in the noise. Because today, we're about to rediscover the lost power of silence and the Stoic secret to true freedom in an age of endless opinions. Number 1. Epictetus and the power of indifference. Epictetus was born a slave, yet he became one of the freest men in history. His chains were physical, but his mind was untouchable. In a society obsessed with control, status, and opinions, he taught something revolutionary. Peace begins when we stop giving power to what we cannot command. The Stoics called this the discipline of indifference, the art of separating what is within our control from what is not. In a world like ours, where social media can turn every disagreement into a storm, this lesson has never been more urgent. According to Epictetus, it's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about things. These words cut through centuries, right into the heart of our time. Every day, people wake up already burdened by what strangers said online, what news went viral, what someone else thinks about their choices. But Epictetus reminds us that suffering isn't born from events, but from our interpretation of them. What enslaves the modern mind isn't politics or algorithms, it's the illusion that we must react to everything we see. Marcus Aurelius lived this wisdom as an emperor constantly surrounded by chaos. Yet in his private writings, he anchored himself with a simple image, the rock. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The waves crash upon the rock, but it stands still, and around it the foam disperses." That is the Stoic way, not to resist emotion, but to rise above impulse. Indifference isn't apathy, it's power, it's the refusal to hand your peace over to the noise of the world. William B. Irvine calls this the mental economy of Stoicism, a way to preserve energy for what truly matters. Every unnecessary reaction is a withdrawal from your inner bank of tranquility. When you stop reacting to the uncontrollable, you start reclaiming the strength to shape what truly belongs to you, your actions, your mindset, your virtue. According to Ryan Holiday, the world will test you, provoke you, distract you, but you decide whether to give in or to stand firm. Chrysippus, one of the architects of Stoic thought, believed that true wisdom is the alignment between reason and nature. To be indifferent, then, is to act in harmony with the logos, the rational order of the universe. It means accepting that everything changes, fortunes, opinions, reputations. Nothing stays. Heraclitus, long before, said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice." When you grasp this impermanence, you understand that attachment to what shifts is the root of suffering. The modern Stoic faces a new battlefield: the endless feed, the outrage machine, the constant demand for validation. Yet the ancient cure remains the same. Observe without clinging, engage without losing yourself, act without needing control over outcomes. That's the essence of indifference. Musonius Rufus, often called the Roman Socrates, taught his students that a wise person isn't cold, but composed. His calm wasn't detachment from life, but commitment to living with reason over impulse. Indifference, for him, wasn't about turning away. It was about standing tall, unshaken, as the world spins. According to Musonius Rufus, the truly rational never acts in haste. When you master this calm observation, you become like that rock Marcus Aurelius described, grounded amid crashing waves. You stop chasing control and start embodying it. You stop reacting and start responding. You realize that freedom isn't found in bending the world, but in mastering the self. The man who learns to be indifferent to the noise outside gains authority over the universe within. Number 2. Seneca and the wisdom of silence. Seneca lived surrounded by power, corruption, and constant noise. As an advisor to Emperor Nero, his life was a paradox, a philosopher of virtue standing in the heart of decadence. Yet even in the midst of political storms and moral chaos, Seneca discovered something most men never do. Silence isn't weakness, it's mastery. In a world addicted to reaction, he learned that silence is not the absence of voice, but the presence of wisdom. According to Seneca, silence is a lesson in wisdom for those who are willing to listen. He understood that words have weight, and that the wise speak only when words can improve upon silence. Today, in a digital age where every thought becomes a post, every moment a statement, Seneca's insight feels prophetic. We've mistaken noise for relevance and speed for intelligence. The modern world rewards the loudest, but history remembers the calmest. Silence, in truth, is the most underrated form of strength. Ryan Holiday reminds us, calm is contagious, but so is chaos. When you choose silence, you choose calm. You create a sacred space within, a pause between impulse and action. That pause is where reason awakens and ego dissolves. William B. Irvine explains that silence is an act of mental discipline, a moment when we reclaim sovereignty over our attention. By resisting the need to respond, we train the mind to remain unmoved by provocation. According to Marcus Aurelius, when someone offends you, think immediately about what kind of person they are. Once you understand that, compassion will replace your anger. In this insight, Marcus Aurelius reveals that silence isn't passive, it's transformative. It turns reaction into reflection. It shifts the focus from others to yourself, from chaos to clarity. Chrysippus believed that virtue was impossible without self-command, and silence was the training ground for that control. Every time you resist the urge to respond, you strengthen your inner empire. Musonius Rufus taught that the wise man does not seek to defeat others in debate, but to defeat his own arrogance. That is the power of silence. It humbles the ego and elevates the soul. It frees us from the endless hunger to be right, to be seen, to be validated. According to Musonius Rufus, he who speaks only when necessary already possesses a kind of nobility. Heraclitus wrote centuries earlier that nature loves to hide. He meant that truth rarely shouts. It whispers beneath the surface of things. The same applies to wisdom. It blooms not in noise, but in stillness. Donald Robertson connects this ancient insight to modern psychology. By embracing silence, we cultivate emotional distance from impulsive thoughts, allowing logic to lead instead of emotion. Seneca practiced this discipline daily, even when surrounded by the chaos of Roman politics. He chose silence not as retreat, but as resistance, a rebellion against the tyranny of noise. He understood that the mind, like a sword, dulls with overuse. Silence sharpens it again. The wise man, Seneca believed, never needs to shout. His calm presence already speaks louder than any argument. Silence becomes his armor, his language, his way of cutting through the world's confusion without saying a word. According to Seneca, the mind that is calm is not controlled by the world. It is the world that bends to it. In an age where speaking first has become a virtue, the Stoic remembers that listening is an art. The pause between words can heal, humble, and transform. Silence then is not emptiness, it's presence, it's power, it's the space where the soul breathes and where wisdom finds its voice. Number 3. Marcus Aurelius and the Inner Empire. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire in the world, yet he spent his nights fighting battles no one could see, the storms within his own mind. Surrounded by ambition, betrayal, and constant uncertainty, he came to understand a timeless truth. Ruling others is easy compared to ruling oneself. The real empire, he discovered, is not made of borders and armies, but of thoughts, discipline, and reason. While the Roman legions guarded his frontiers, Marcus guarded something far more fragile: his peace. According to Marcus Aurelius, you don't have to have an opinion about everything. That single sentence dismantles the foundation of modern chaos. In a culture that demands immediate reaction, Marcus offers permission to breathe, to step back, to observe. He wasn't detached from life. He was deeply engaged, yet never enslaved by it. He understood that true strength lies in self-command, not domination. Donald Robertson explains that Marcus practiced what the Stoics called epoche, the suspension of judgment, a momentary pause before forming an opinion, giving the mind space to respond with reason instead of reflex. According to Donald Robertson, between stimulus and response lies the moment where freedom is born. The world we inhabit isn't so different from ancient Rome. We are still pulled by ambition, pride, and the opinions of others. We still chase validation as if it were oxygen. But Marcus reminds us that peace doesn't depend on the world calming down. It depends on our ability to remain calm within it. The inner empire is a fortress built on awareness, not avoidance. It's the space inside where thoughts are weighed, emotions are observed, and impulses are tamed. William B. Irvine writes, "The man who masters his impulses is more powerful than one who commands an empire." Ryan Holiday echoes this in modern terms, saying that emotional control is the rarest and most valuable skill in today's age of distraction. It's easy to rule through noise, but it takes mastery to rule through stillness. Marcus trained his mind the way soldiers trained their bodies, through repetition and reflection. Every morning, he would remind himself that the day would bring fools, critics, and adversity, yet he chose to face them with understanding rather than resentment. According to Marcus Aurelius, when you wake up, tell yourself, "Today I will meet people who are ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, but none of them can harm me, for we share the same nature." That mindset is the blueprint of resilience. It transforms obstacles into training, challenges into practice. Chrysippus, centuries before Marcus, believed that the universe itself was rational, that everything happening around us is an invitation to exercise virtue. To him, nothing external could truly harm the wise man, because his fortress was internal. Musonius Rufus continued this legacy, teaching that discipline over emotion is the highest form of freedom. The inner empire is not a place of retreat, but a base for action. The Stoic does not withdraw from life. He engages it with precision and purpose. He does not seek control over others, but control over himself, because he knows that from inner order comes outer influence. According to Musonius Rufus, he who conquers his passions governs the world within. The modern world tells you to react, to perform, to fight every battle for validation. Marcus Aurelius whispers another way: stay still, observe, master the mind first, and the rest will follow. When you stop trying to control everything outside, you gain absolute command over what truly matters inside. In that quiet strength lies the empire that never falls. Number 4. The ego and the need to be right. The ego is a master of disguise. It wears the mask of conviction, of justice, of intellect. But beneath it all lies one obsession: to be right. The Stoics saw the ego not as an enemy to destroy, but as a force to understand and restrain. Seneca wrote often about the vanity of human pride, warning that the craving for approval chains us to the opinions of others. The ego doesn't seek truth, it seeks victory, and in the pursuit of victory, it destroys peace. According to Seneca, nothing is more miserable than to depend on the opinion of others for your happiness. This is the invisible disease of our age, the addiction to validation. Every post, every argument, every moment online becomes a silent plea. See me, agree with me, prove that I matter. But as Epictetus reminded his students, those who depend on external praise are slaves to those who give it. The Stoic does not reject recognition. He simply refuses to need it. His worth is measured not by applause, but by alignment with reason. According to Epictetus, if you want to be invincible, do not fight for what does not depend on you. Marcus Aurelius echoed this in his Meditations. He wrote about fame, legacy, and how both fade like dust in the wind. To him, ego was a kind of delusion, a voice whispering that we must be remembered to be significant. But Marcus understood that eternity erases all names, and the only victory that endures is mastery of self. According to Marcus Aurelius, soon you will have forgotten everything, and everyone will have forgotten you. That realization doesn't lead to despair. It leads to freedom. The moment you stop needing to be right, you begin to see clearly. The need to dominate fades, and the need to understand awakens. Chrysippus described reason as the divine spark within us, the logos that connects our mind to the structure of the universe. When the ego takes control, it blinds that spark. When humility returns, reason shines again. Heraclitus, centuries before, warned that the common man lives by opinion, but the wise man lives by reason. This is the great division between ego and wisdom. Ego seeks reaction, wisdom seeks reflection. The modern Stoic faces new versions of old temptations, the debates that never end, the pride that masquerades as moral certainty, the constant pressure to perform intellect. But as Ryan Holiday reminds us, ego is the enemy of growth. According to Ryan Holiday, the ego is the enemy of greatness. Massimo Pigliucci expands on this idea, explaining that ego isn't to be crushed, but observed, because awareness is the path to control. When you notice the voice inside demanding to be right, you can step back and ask, is this my reason speaking or my insecurity? That moment of awareness is Stoicism in action. Musonius Rufus believed that every battle against the ego is a form of education. He called it the training of the soul. To him, humility was not submission but clarity. The recognition that truth needs no defender. The wise man doesn't silence others. He silences his own need to prove them wrong. According to Musonius Rufus, there is no greater victory than mastery over one's passions. And so, the ego's cage isn't made of steel. It's made of words, arguments, and the desperate need to be acknowledged. The Stoic learns to step outside that cage, to stand quietly in the space beyond validation. their peace returns, their understanding replaces pride, their freedom is born. The ego shouts to be heard, the wise man listens to understand. One seeks applause, the other seeks harmony, and when you finally realize that being right is meaningless if it costs your inner peace, that's the moment you stop arguing with the world and start mastering yourself. Number 5. The Stoic practice, the art of observing without reacting. To the Stoics, wisdom was never a theory, it was a practice. A daily discipline of seeing clearly, thinking calmly, and acting justly. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by war and political chaos, wrote to himself not as an emperor, but as a student, a man trying to master the only kingdom that truly matters, his mind. The Stoic practice begins with a single act that seems simple, but is the hardest of all: to observe without reacting. In an age where reaction is a reflex and silence feels unnatural, this is the true rebellion of the modern Stoic. According to Marcus Aurelius, if you are disturbed by something external, it is not the thing itself that troubles you, but your judgment about it, and this you can erase at once. That sentence is the cornerstone of Stoic freedom. It's the realization that between the world and our response lies a sacred space, the space where choice exists. Modern psychology calls it mindfulness, but the Stoics called it prosoche, the vigilant attention to one's own thoughts. When you learn to stand in that space, the world loses its power to dictate your peace. Robertson describes this mental posture as Stoic mindfulness, a disciplined awareness that replaces impulsive emotion with deliberate understanding. The Stoic doesn't suppress feeling, he interprets it. He observes the rise of anger, fear, or pride, and instead of obeying, he studies. That act of awareness transforms the emotion from master to messenger. According to Robertson, every emotion is information. Wisdom begins when you stop reacting and start listening to what it's trying to tell you. Chrysippus saw this practice as the highest expression of reason, to observe life like a scientist of the soul. He believed that emotions are judgments, not forces beyond control. By changing the judgment, you change the emotion. Heraclitus, centuries before, hinted at the same truth when he said that the soul is dyed by the color of its thoughts. Observation, then, is purification, the daily act of cleansing perception before it hardens into reaction. William B. Irvine compares this to financial management of the mind, a conscious investment of attention. Every reaction is a withdrawal. Every moment of calm observation is a deposit into your inner wealth. When you stop wasting energy on things you can't control, you accumulate a reserve of strength, patience, and clarity. This is not detachment, it's precision. According to William B. Irvine, peace is not the absence of emotion, but the control of attention. Ryan Holiday often reminds us that the Stoic life isn't about being unshakable by pretending to be numb. It's about being grounded because you see the world as it is, not as your fears paint it. Observation without reaction is the art of seeing clearly, of witnessing chaos and choosing reason instead of panic. Massimo Pigliucci describes this ability as lucidity, the moment when the fog of impulse clears and the mind perceives truth. For him, Stoicism is not about indifference to life, but intimacy with it, a state where you are fully present, yet never consumed. According to Massimo Pigliucci, the Stoic doesn't avoid the storm. He learns how to stand in the rain. Musonius Rufus believed that through this constant observation, compassion naturally arises. When you see others' mistakes through the lens of understanding, judgment dissolves. You realize that everyone is fighting invisible battles, and anger gives way to empathy. This is the emotional intelligence of the Stoic, calm, attentive, humane. According to Musonius Rufus, what is rational is never impulsive. The Stoic practice is not a retreat from life. It's an elevation above its turbulence. It's the art of seeing the fire without being burned, the art of hearing the noise without losing your melody. To observe without reacting is to live with clarity, to choose the calm response over the chaotic reflex. Every moment gives you this choice, to be dragged by emotion or to direct it. To be a spectator of your thoughts or their prisoner, the Stoic chooses the first, because in that choice lies unbreakable freedom. We live in a world that glorifies noise, where every opinion must be broadcast, every thought shared, every emotion displayed. Yet the Stoics knew that the loudest voices rarely carry the deepest truths. True wisdom whispers. It doesn't seek the spotlight, it seeks the soul. And silence, the kind that comes from understanding rather than avoidance, is not emptiness, it's mastery. According to Marcus Aurelius, stand firm like a rock against which the waves crash. It remains unmoved, and the raging sea falls still around it. That rock is the mind of the Stoic, unshaken, deliberate and calm amid the violence of opinions. Ryan Holiday reminds us that silence is not withdrawal from life. It's engagement with life on your own terms. It's the decision to lead yourself before trying to lead others. The quiet mind doesn't need validation, it builds value. It doesn't chase noise, it creates clarity. Donald Robertson writes that the mind at peace is the only mind capable of virtue, because only when the storm inside settles can reason rise. Silence, then, is the soil where all Stoic virtues grow: patience, humility, courage, justice. And William B. Irvine expands on this by saying that real freedom is not in expressing every thought, but in mastering which thoughts deserve expression. According to William B. Irvine, the greatest freedom is choosing not to respond. Epictetus, long before the Stoics, said that the soul is forged in the fire of calm. It's a paradox, tranquility as fire. But that's what the Stoics understood. Peace isn't passivity, it's strength under control. It's the stillness of a lion before the leap, the pause of the mind before the decision, the breath before the word. Musonius Rufus taught that silence also carries compassion. When you choose not to respond with anger, you spare others from your passion and yourself from regret. Heracles believed that a calm mind is the foundation of kindness, because when we stop reacting, we start understanding. The Stoic silence, therefore, is not the quiet of fear, but the quiet of clarity. According to Epictetus, if you wish to be invincible, do not fight for what is beyond your control. So pause, breathe. Let the world rage as it must, and remember that your peace is not up for negotiation. Each time you choose not to react, you win a battle no one sees, the battle against yourself. And that victory, silent though it may be, is the foundation of every great life. If this message spoke to you, share in the comments what it awakened inside. Your reflection may help someone else find their own calm, and if you found value in this journey, support it. Like the video, share it with someone lost in the noise, and subscribe to keep this light alive. Because in the next video, we'll face a hidden poison that quietly infects even the strongest minds. A silent enemy that makes you doubt your own worth, your own talent, and your right to succeed. Stay close to the light, because what's coming next might change the way you see yourself forever. And remember, the true power is not in convincing the world, but in remaining at peace within it. See you in the next video.